Hey guys, and welcome to another video. I've been doing something and working on a secret project that is no longer going to be secret, and I have been doing so much trial and error, and I'm like, I've got to do a video on this because I am lost, and there's not a whole lot of, there is kind of information on this subject, but not what I personally need. And so I thought, you know what, as I'm figuring this out, I'm going to do a YouTube video to help out any other authors who are dealing with the same problem. So basically, I am working on getting the audiobooks done for the Valiant series. So the Valiant series, Hunter, Shifter, Samurai, and Assassin, the first 4 and all the short stories with them are all done. They're finally on Amazon, so the ebooks are done. The paperbacks have finally been completed, and they look great, and I'm so excited. And I thought it's time that I work on the audiobooks. And so this is my first time doing audiobooks with ACX, where I actually have to hire a narrator through ACX and doing it that way. I'm also doing it on a budget, so I have a lot of budget tips to help out, which may be a separate video. So if you want budget tips, let me know in the comments, and I'll hopefully get a video up on that soon. But the first audiobook that I've ever made, I actually hired a narrator on Fiverr and found one that was within a budget I could afford, and I hired him, paid him, and he did Dark Magi. So I'll have links to Dark Magi in the description below. And then the second audiobook that I did as a test was just doing it myself to see if I could narrate my own books. I do read. I'm very good at it. I like acting and theater, and it's really fun for me. So, and because I'm the author, I know the tone of voice and how I want the characters to sound. And so I did that with The Crystal Heist, and I narrated that myself. And I told myself I'm never going to do that again because ACX is very, very, very picky on the audio formatting. And so while I can read and record myself, the formatting and editing the audio was a pain in the butt. I also breathe really loudly, and so having to cut out each breath got on my nerves, and it got disproved so many times by ACX because I don't know the details of making it good. I eventually did get it, so The Crystal Heist will also be linked in the description below for both audiobooks for that. So that's been my experience with audiobooks, neither of which had anything to do with finding a narrator on ACX, which is Audible's and Amazon's audio narrating platform, audio producing platform, I guess. It's basically like KDP, where you produce your audiobook. So a little bit of background there on ACX. You go to acx.com, you make an account, do all that jazz, and then you can do several things if you're an author. So the first thing you can do is go just look for narrators. Narrators and producers generally are the same thing, and they're called producers on ACX, just to get that term out of the way. You can go and listen to them, and there's a lot of filters, and that's what I really like. And so this is the first step that I would recommend to anybody. So basically this video is going to be mistakes to avoid when making your own audiobook. And because I've made a lot of them, and I'm kind of fumbling around and figuring all of this out as I go. And yes, there are tutorials out there, but as I said, there hasn't been any that's been personally helpful to me directly. And also navigating ACX, I can't hardly find any tutorials on how to navigate the platform. So I've been just kind of fumbling around. So I hope that this video can help you. So let's get into it. So as I was saying, the first thing that I would recommend any author doing is just get on the platform, play around with it, and just get yourself used to the platform. I'm very fumbly, and so other than that, that's kind of like the precursor. I would say your very first official step should be to get on there and just search for narrators. They have a lot of filters, so like you could determine whether you want a male or female voice. You can determine what genre of audiobook you're looking for. You could also filter it by age, voice style. So if you want someone who's more brooding or husky, if you want somebody who's more lighthearted and charismatic, they have all kinds of words sometimes that I didn't even know what that voice tone would have sounded like. They also have it separated by accent. So if you want, like, they also do language. So if you want French or English or, any language like that. So obviously I want English because my books are in English, but you can also filter it by accent. So say I want it to be in English, but I want it with a Spanish accent because I have a Spanish character, or a French accent or a British accent. You can actually filter it by accent as well. and it'll pull up a list of narrators that fit those parameters once you filter them out. My suggestion is to go on there for a good couple of hours and just listen to narrators that you're interested in and that you like their voice style, and just find out kind of the style of narrator that you are looking for and hoping for when it comes to your book. I would suggest not picking anybody out at this stage. You're just here to kind of listen to the different narrators. Now, they will have their names listed. Usually they'll have a picture. If they don't, it doesn't mean they're not professional. So I go by the picture, if there is one, and then how many audition, because on their page they'll have samples of them reading, and I would go by how many samples they have. They have a bio. They'll list out any accomplishments or like what they're good at, you know, experience that they have, that sort of thing. So you just got to get a feel for yourself on that stuff. The next thing that I would suggest that you do is upload your a sample of your book. Basically, it's called an audition, and what it does is you put your book up there and you basically put the first little bit, whether it's a prologue or a little bit of chapter 1, as kind of an audition for narrators to find. And I honestly put mine up there, but I thought that I was going to have to seek the narrators out. And this is the first thing that I want to tell readers, is that I had a lot of auditions that come for both of my books. I put up Shifter and I put up Assassin, because I have issues with Hunter, which I'll talk about later, and then I went ahead with Samurai and jumped the gun, which is another mistake I'll talk about later. So I put up Shifter and Assassin, books 2 and books 4 of the Valiant series, and I got so many auditions for that. I actually had a hard time choosing between narrators, and right now on Assassin I'm still debating between 2 different narrators. So put them up there and just wait for narrators to come in. Now, if you don't get narrators at auditioning, then don't freak out. You can go and seek them out. But I would suggest not making an official decision until you hear a narrator read a little bit of your book to hear what they sound like. And this is for several different reasons. So this is my first mistake, which is what I did with book 3, Samurai. So Samurai is based on feudal Japan, even though it is a fantasy world. So I had always envisioned an audiobook with a Japanese accent in English, read in English, but with a Japanese accent and a female narrator. So when I first got on ACX, that's what I did first. I went on, did those filters I talked about, and I just found any and all female Japanese accent English readers who were under royalty share, which I'll explain in a minute. I messaged all of them. I picked one that I liked the best that was actually royalty share, and we went ahead with it. And I didn't think ahead of things because this narrator had a little bit of an older voice, and it's just not really a good fit for Samurai, which is nothing against her. And that was my mistake because I'm new and I didn't know what I was doing. My first mistake for authors to avoid when you're doing your own audiobook or when you're doing a audiobook for your story is to not jump the gun. Be patient and wait. Wait for auditions to come in. Wait for narrators to audition. So if they don't come to you and say you look, and so you have to seek them out, then ask them, hey, would you be willing to try this? Would you be willing to audition for this? And so seek out narrators that you're interested in, and do not jump the gun. Do not make any immediate decisions. Take time to make your decisions, because I jumped the gun and it could potentially get you into a lot of trouble if you're not careful. So that was the first mistake that I made. Another tip that I wanted to give you guys is when you're auditioning, when you're listening to the auditions or listening to narrators, not only should you be paying attention to whether it sounds good, whether it fits your story, whether they sound like your characters, whether they speak really well, you know, that sort of thing. But there are 2 things that I look for in a narrator's voice more than whether they match the character or sound like the character. And that's 2 things. The first thing is whether they sound natural or whether it feels like forced. It's hard to explain how to tell this, but I can really tell the difference between somebody who's reading and talking naturally versus somebody who sounds like they're just reading from a script. And you want somebody who reads naturally, because that's going to keep people listening and be more natural and easy to listen to and fun for people to listen to. And so even if the production's like fantastic and perfect and cool and crisp, you want to make sure that they sound natural and aren't just reading from a script. So that's the first thing. The second thing, which I briefly mentioned, was production. You want it to sound high quality. So if it's really quiet, if you can't hardly hear the audio, if there's background noise, if you can hear them clicking the recording on and off, if it's there's a lot of pop sounds, if they have a lot of breaths that they didn't cut out, if there is just low quality sound to it, do not go for that at all. Make sure that the narrator that you choose has great production. You want it to sound cool, crisp, smooth. The production should be perfect. You should hire somebody that knows what they're doing. What happens is a lot of times, especially when you're doing royalty share, which I'll explain in a minute, is you get audio narrators who are just starting off looking for money, which there's nothing wrong with that. They don't know what they're doing, and that's fine, and I wish them all the best. I'm kind of would have been the same way and was the same way when I did the Crystal Heist, but you really want somebody who's going to be good for your book, and you want your audiobook to be the best it can be, to be professional, and so that's what you're looking for, is a professional production. So the production sound and whether they sound forced or natural are going to be the top two most important things when you're choosing a narrator. So what is royalty share and how does this all work? So there are 3 different options that you can do when you decide to do an audiobook. Number 1 is basically to pay them outright, which is what I did, but I didn't do it through ACX. I did it through Fiverr. So you can do this several ways. You can find a narrator via ACX, and it'll be paid per finished hour. So essentially what that means is or per finished hour, one of those two, is it's usually between $200 to $400 per finished hour. So it's however long your audiobook is how much that's going to be to multiply it. So if it's $200 per finished hour, then, and your book is 8 hours long, then you would just take 200 times 8. And that would be your audiobook price, which would be $1,600. And yes, I had to do the math. That's the first way, and you would pay that outright, which is super expensive. So if you're on a budget like me, you could go to Fiverr, you could find somebody cheaper, you could go through ACX, find somebody who's a little cheaper. But again, remember the quality. You want somebody good quality, and so if you go cheaper, like $50 per finished hour or $100 per finished hour, which is still going to be expensive and pricey, their quality is usually not going to be as good. And I've with Fiverr, I actually found somebody who's really good, who is willing to go down into my budget. So shout out to Albie Robles, the narrator of Dark Magi, because he was amazing and his quality was fantastic. And he also even did a behind the scenes YouTube video on his channel that I was able to use as promotion purposes. And he was fantastic. So just keep in mind the production value and the way the production sounds, and be very careful if you're hiring somebody for very cheap. So the next 2 options is royalty share and royalty share plus. Royalty share by itself is simply basically what it sounds like. You don't pay anything up front. You don't pay anything to the narrator afterwards. ACX will divide the royalties between your book, between you and your narrator. So once you publish your book and it gets out there, every sale that you make, some of the royalties go to you and some of it goes to your narrator. And so that way you don't have to, it's basically free for you because it comes out of your book. So you get less royalties because some of them are going to your narrator. Which to me is not that much of a loss, because yes, I hope that my audiobooks make money. Yes, I still want to get royalties from them, but keep in mind that you're also selling them as ebooks or paperbacks or both. So you're getting royalties from those as well as the audiobook. So as long as you still have a little bit coming in, then you can also adjust the price of the audiobook to be plenty for you and your narrator to share. I do believe it's 20% for you and 20% for your narrator. So that's royalty share. Royalty share plus is the same thing. Royalties get divided, but you also pay a little bit forward, but it's less than what you would do with paying it outright. So instead of $200 per finished hour, it's an extra just $300 plain plus royalty share. I don't do that one. To me, it would be better to choose either royalty share or the paying it outright. So basically you have to decide between royalty share or paying it outright, or royalty share plus if that's what you want to do. And so essentially the same thing applies for royalty share as it does when you're trying to find a cheap narrator. You want to make sure that the quality of the sound of the audio is good and that the narrator knows what they're doing when they're editing. I have a little bit more experience because I had to edit myself. So all breaths should be cut out. Your narrator should not be breathing really heavily heavily in the recording. There should not be any background noise at all, whether it's cats meowing or animals making sounds or cars on the highway, crickets in the background, which I had trouble with because we live in the country, whether it's people talking, different distant voices. There should be no background sounds. You should not hear any clicks as they start the recording or stop the recording. And of course, it should be as smooth as possible. The audio itself should be a higher volume and just high quality itself. And it shouldn't be too soft or like staticky or anything like that. And so you want to make sure that you get somebody who knows what they're doing. Now, you will find a lot of royalty share people who are just people in it for the money and they're not focused a whole lot on quality. That's not to say that every narrator who does royalty share doesn't care about quality. That is not true, and there are so many who do, and I found several who put in so much effort into making it sound good and doing a good production, even to the point of one of them, the narrator for Shifter that I have chosen to go forward with, is willing to put forth the effort to make an accent for the character that doesn't exist. And so we're kind of working on that right now. And so there are a lot of narrators who will put forth the effort, and that's the kind of narrator that you want, who's willing to try to make the best audiobook possible so that you both can make profit out of this. But there will be people who are just money mooching and just looking for quick money, and they won't put forth the effort. They'll have low quality stuff, so you want to be careful and avoid those. But again, looking at their bio, reading their information, looking at their examples, even if I get a narration that I really like, that sounds good, I will stalk the person on their ACX page and I will listen to all their samples to make sure that, okay, they didn't just, pamper up the audition. They are consistently doing good recordings, high quality recordings. And so that's the other thing that I would recommend, is you checking out their stuff and making sure that you pick somebody who is consistent in their recordings. So all of this to say, the big mistake that I made was jumping the gun with Samurai, because I didn't know that the narrators would come to you for the auditions. I thought you would have to seek out narrators, and I was thinking, oh, nobody's going to find my book, so I'm going to have to seek them out. So I chose kind of the first narrator that I found that I liked, that was royalty share, that had a Japanese accent. And of course, she read Memoirs of a Geisha, and that hits close to home because I really love that movie. It's my favorite movie. And so hearing the book, it was just like, oh yes, this is, perfect. I just didn't think it through in terms of the ages of the age of my characters. And so I got myself into a situation which I'm hoping will be resolved, and everything. So the next thing that I encourage you to do is to talk to your narrators first. Don't make any assumptions. Really get in conversations with people and ask them questions. If you're doing royalty share, you need to, if you listen to the audition or to a sample and you really like them, you need to talk to them and be honest with them about your budget constraints or what is going on. Say, hey, this is my book, this is my series, this is whatever. I can only afford royalty share because I'm on a tight budget. And so you will get narrators that'll tell you, sorry, I'm only for finished hour, or I'm only doing royalty plus, I don't do royalty share. There are a lot of narrators who do not do royalty share. So you will have people who will reject you, and I had that trouble at first, but then that's when I started getting the auditions coming in, so it kind of like re-encouraged me. So don't be afraid about rejections, but really get into conversations with people about what you want and what you're looking for. The other thing I would say is to take it seriously in terms of the age of your characters. It's more probably an OCD with me, but I've had that problem twice now. And I am and it's just kind of a thing to just look out for, is to make sure that you're happy with your narrator before you move forward with it. And this was one thing that I really truly regret about Hunter, because when its audiobook was made, the rights did not belong to me. My publishers did that, so I was not involved in the process at all. And I basically was told, hey, the audiobook's out, and I was able to buy the audiobook, or I think I got a free code for it, and I listened to it, and I didn't like a lot of what was done in the book because I wasn't involved in the process of making sure that certain things are pronounced correctly, making sure that the character voice sounds the way that I'm hoping, and making sure that the emotion is correct in one scene or another. And so I didn't really have that. So when you're going through this process, you want to make sure that you get the performance that you're hoping for. Obviously, you don't want to be rude or bossy, but I would suggest doing an audition of a scene that you are really looking for something specific, so like a lot of emotion, or to make, like if you're writing something that's supposed to be intense and suspenseful, you may not just pick chapter 1. You could potentially pick a suspenseful scene to make sure that you find a narrator with that level of suspense that you're looking for, or a particular character that you're like, okay, I got to get this character voice right, or a scene that has both the main characters, if they're a man and a woman, and you want to make sure that your single narrator, whether he's a man or a woman, or she's a woman, can do both voices pretty decently in a way that you're satisfied with. Or like with me with Shifter, I needed a person who could do Barone's accent, and so I posted a chapter with Barone to get to see and hear the accents that would come in. You also want to be clear in your instructions and what you're hoping for, so don't be bossy, but don't be afraid to tell your narrator, hey, I'm looking for this, I'm looking for that, and be clear in your directions so they know what to do. So the next thing would be, you want to make sure that you give them a guide to pronounce things in your book. This is true especially for fantasy and sci-fi, but names, places, different words in other languages, and everything else, you want to make sure that's absolutely clear. So any word that may not be clear on how to pronounce it, include that in your pronunciation guide, so you can send that to them in a message directly. You can email it to them if they prefer it that way, but give them a pronunciation guide so they can make sure that they pronounce and enunciate and get things pronounced correctly. The next part I would say is give them character guide in terms of what each character is supposed to sound like. So for me, I had to be very clear about Barone's accent, and one mistake that I made, and this was minor because I was able to talk to the narrator and adjust it, but I just said Barone has an accent that doesn't exist. That's what I said in my notes for the audition, and so I kept getting auditions coming in with really weird accents. A lot of them, like there was a lot of Russian sounding ones, there was Irish, there was a lot of, because he is a dragon, a lot of people made that assumption and kind of went for a more dragon, European, Russian kind of style. And I realized, oh crap, it's more of a Native American accent, and this is all wrong. And that was a mistake on my part because I was not clear in my instructions that he has a Native American sounding accent that technically doesn't exist. I left it too open to interpretation, and everybody did a fantastic job. I loved all the auditions I got. I loved all the effort that was put forth, but it just wasn't correct because I wasn't clear in the instructions. And fortunately, I was able to to mention it to her, to the narrator that I ended up choosing, hey, it's not exactly Irish sounding and it's more Native American, and we were able to work things out there. So the next mistake and tip that I have is to be clear in your instructions and your audition for what you're looking for, and be clear in your instructions when you upload your full manuscript after you make an offer. So basically, once you do have the auditions and you do choose somebody, you would make them an offer, which is where you guys sign a contract. If you are doing royalty share, it will bind you guys to a contract that once they get started at your actual manuscript, you cannot break out of it. So that's what I said, be patient and take your time. This is not a process to be rushed. This is something meant to be patient and take your time with. You don't want to get yourself into a situation you can't get out of. So make sure that you have a narrator that you like, that fits your story and the tone of your story, and the characters and everything else. Make sure that they have really good production and sound on the narration, and also make sure that that they sound natural and everything else before you get yourself into a offer. Now, once you do find a narrator that you like and you are certain that they're okay with royalty share, if that's what you're doing, or you agree upon a price, that sort of thing, you tell them everything about your book and they've accepted it all, you would send them an offer, they accept the offer, and then you go into what's called production. So your book is no longer listed as open to audition, so you will stop receiving auditions at this point. And the next step is that you send them a 15-minute sample, and they will read this 15 minutes. So I thought it was the first 15 minutes of your book, but I have read on forums and stuff that it can be kind of a mesh in your book if you want to touch on multiple different things, like hard parts in your book or intense parts or things that you want to make sure that this narrator can get it done. So it's basically 15 minutes of your story. You send that to them and they give it to you. They read it to you as an example to show you how things are going to go. And it's kind of, I read on some forums that it is another way to help you know for sure if this is the right narrator or not. So this is the last time that you have to cancel before you get yourself into a contract if it's royalty share. So this is the last opportunity you have to make sure. So you really, I cannot emphasize this enough. You want to make sure that you're happy with the narrator at this point. So they will send you the 15 minutes, and you can either you can either ask them to make changes, like, hey, you know, you pronounced this wrong, or this was a little off, you know, can you change this a little bit? Can you fix this? And you can either ask them for changes, or you can accept it. Once you accept it, it's done. They're going to produce the whole audiobook. And I think you can reject the audiobook after they produce it, but you don't want to waste a narrator's time by making them do the entire audiobook and then not accepting it, and they don't even get paid if you're doing royalty share. So I encourage you, it is best for both of you to either accept them or reject them at this point after they send you the 15-minute sample. You do not want to waste anybody's time. And also, don't be afraid to speak up. That was what I had the issue with my samurai narrator was, oh my gosh, I don't want to hurt somebody's feelings. We're already in production. I'm terrified. But at the same time, you're still going to be giving part of your book royalties to the narrator. So you want to make sure that it's a good narrator and that you're happy with it, and not get yourself involved in something that you're not happy with, like with Hunter with me, which I really didn't have a choice on, but you don't want to get yourself into a situation like that. So, and it's best, you know, to save them time as well, because they've probably, I don't know how long they spent on your 15 minutes, but it's not as long spent on a 15-minute sample in comparison to working for weeks and months on a whole book that you're not even going to be happy with. So please take this 15-minute sample seriously. And use this as an opportunity to really narrow down, is this the narrator that I want for good or not? And make that decision now. So that's basically the 3 main tips and mistakes that I made, and mistakes to avoid if you're doing an audiobook, is to be patient and not rush into anything, not jump the gun. To be clear in your instructions and be clear on what you want and what you're asking for and what the book or the character sounds like, and then to use the 15-minute sample wisely and not to get yourself into any contract or situation that you can't get out of and that you're stuck with. So I hope that these tips have helped you, and definitely that you guys will not do these 3 main mistakes that I made when looking for an audiobook narrator. Also, if you guys do want to know how to make an audiobook, and how to really navigate ACX's platform, let me know. I couldn't find too many tutorials or information on it, so I'm happy to try to teach people what I know and actually do screen share where you guys can see what I've watch me as I navigate it and walk you guys through the process. Or if you guys also want to know how to do an audiobook, if you literally have no money to spend on it, but do it to where it still comes out professional, I can help you with that too. A lot of people, you'll either hear, oh, you can do an audiobook for free, or you'll hear, you know, you can't do an audiobook for free. It'll be so unprofessional. And it's possible to find a balance where you do an audiobook for free that is professional. It just, you know, it takes work and time to find the right narrator who is actually professional and willing to help you out and do the royalty share and benefit the book itself by doing a good job, being professional, and the book will sell more. So for the royalty share narrators, it is advantage. It's more of an advantage to them to be professional and do a good job, because then the book will sell more. If you know. So anyways, that's kind of a different thing. But either way, if you want me to do a video tutorial on how to navigate ACX and how the platform itself works, let me know. If you want me to do a video about how to actually have or make an audiobook on a budget, let me know as well, because I have a lot of tips on that, because I've done my own. I've hired somebody via Fiverr for cheap, and I've also done it now through ACX with royalty share at no cost to myself. So again, just let me know if you guys want that in the comments below. And again, if this video helped you, please hit the like button and share it around with your friends, and be sure to subscribe for more writing videos every Monday.